Testing, testing, 1, 2, testing. Okay, I think there might be a few people still coming, but we'll get started, and hopefully they can join us whilst we're in the middle of things. Okay, we've finally got our two speakers, which is great, so we can sort of get going for the evening. First of all, thanks for everyone for attending and welcome. Appreciate you coming out tonight. I know it's a it's a school night. The weather's great. Everyone's out drinking and whatnot. So for you guys to be here with us, says a lot about that you're our kind of people, which is good. So tonight's session, we've got a nice lineup tonight. Two great speakers. Hopefully some good conversation. So let's get cracking with that. Just in terms of our agenda, so this is what we're looking to do this evening. So Shubhangi will be on in a few minutes. We'll have a quick break around 7 o'clock. We'll have Laz shortly after that, after a bit of a break. We'll have some food and networking, close, and then we'll have a few drinks, either just in the bar next door somewhere out in town. So it seems the weather's quite nice today as well. So you're all welcome to join for that. I'd like to thank Hippo Digital for the space and sponsoring for the evening. So if you want to know a little bit more about Hippo and what they do, Emma's here in the middle. She sort of works here in the events team. Kindly offered us a space and provided us with refreshments here. So thank you so much for Hippo. Just a quick round of applause for them. So thank you very much. Just a quick one about us. So we're a thriving community of over 1,000 data professionals now signed up to our user group. We've attempted to do monthly in-person events. I guess challenges around sort of locations and sponsors has come into play recently, but we try and get as many sort of events in the year as possible. We showcase top speakers, local talents, global experts. We sort of draft in for speaking at our events as well. Supported by organisations like Hippo Digital here in the north, and obviously dedicated to learning, collaborating, and providing some real sort of community impact as well in the Leeds and Yorkshire area as well. Speaker intro. So we've got Shubhangi Goyal coming up shortly. So she'll be looking at a wireframe to report practical Power BI design workflow. A little bit about Shubhangi. She's award-winning experienced professional in data and AI. Has got a background in computer science engineering and an MSc in business analytics. And she's worked with the likes of Tata Consulting and Admiral as well. So all the way from a global consultancy to UK insurance. Then we'll have Lazaros, Power BI governance foundations matter more than ever. Lazaros is a founder and CEO of Metis BI, started that a couple of years ago now, is that? Going really well. Attended University of Portsmouth, right down south, I believe that is. Worked with likes of Harvey Nichols, TM Lewin, Telefonica, which is why it's probably dressed quite well tonight as well. So looking forward to that talk as well. Just a quick one, it'd be nice. I've reached out to a few people. I guess one of the challenges I've already mentioned is that we have looking for locations. So if you do have potentially location of where you work, it doesn't need to be a massive space, it can be a small space where it has a sort of large screen. But if you do have that sort of space, all I need is sort of a contact, either reception or someone that I can sort of speak to and just try and get, some use of that space, and that'll obviously help with you. Benefit you as well in terms of sort of providing those details and that contact as well. So if you do have any ideas of where any spaces that you might have available, then please let us know. Okay. So what we'll do, give a warm welcome to our first speaker, Shubhangi. Or you got HDMI?
Oh, anything with it.
Let's go with HDMI. okay on the screen over there?
Yeah, I'm just sharing it. So, yeah.
So, hi everyone, good evening. I'm Shubhangi, and I'm going to be presenting my session on Wireframe to report. I know everybody here, because it's a Power BI user group, it must have already been through a lot of Power BI sessions. So this is like my take on it from my consulting days and obviously some of my personal experiences as well. I'm going to be running through some examples as well, and then we will go through some things we can use AI for as well in terms of building dashboards. A quick intro about myself. I think share was already given, but just to revisit, I currently work as a senior analyst at a leading FTSE. I'm also a Microsoft MVP. I was previously at AI startups. Then before that I was at Tata Group. Overall, I have spent like 10 years or so in the industry. I'm a speaker. I also host a podcast on technology, AI, data related topics. I also manage the London chapter for Women in Data, where I support other women who want to build their career in tech or if they're a career transitioner. And yeah, I pursued my master's at University of Bath, and that's just me in a nutshell. So to start with, the agenda for today's session is gonna be these 5 things. I'm gonna be talking about requirement gathering and how basically one can translate business questions, because that's how most of the consulting world works. Then how do you go about wireframing and designing the layout for your dashboards, to like choosing the right visuals, because a lot of times I've seen people build dashboards, they still tend to choose wrong visuals even after today. And then we'll go about building styling, because a lot of time there are very, very specific nuances when you're designing dashboards that do matter to the user, which probably might not matter to us as a builder or as somebody who is like a data scientist or data analyst. And then lastly, the important part, stakeholder review, because a lot of time things are created, but adoption is kept on hold. So these things are important to ensure the success of whatever product you create. So to start with, I would want to start with a story. So a couple of years back, I was working for a customer and I was in consulting, and they came to me saying, this is our dashboard. It had like 5, 6 tabs, and they said, can you make it look pretty? And I was like, what does it mean when you say, can you make it look pretty? He's like, we have built this, we got this built, but nobody really uses it. And I was like, why? Why does nobody use this dashboard? He's like, because I think it's not designed that well. I was like, are you sure? Because there could be more reasons why somebody might not be using it. And so they gave me a couple of reasons from their experiences. They said, oh, this doesn't happen, the team doesn't understand it. The real problems was like they built a dashboard which was more catered to, for example, one particular audience. It did not have the right numbers because they haven't validated, haven't done any processing, and they thought it was all about design. So essentially there was no key requirement phase done, but there was a rush into building it, which is like, I would say, a most common pattern I've seen normally happening around. And this is a really important aspect, because if you don't understand who you're building for, there is a high chance like it's not a successful dashboard in a way. So like I want to emphasize by telling the story, and I had other conversations as well. For example, things like, can you change the theme of this dashboard? Can you make the colors lighter? Or things like, for example, can I use this chart versus this chart? So sometimes they take complexity of the visual as an asset or as a more value add compared to the simplicity. So it's really important to ensure that when you are building a dashboard, the first phase, which is generally the requirement gathering phase, is done with a very key consideration to ensure that anybody who is going to use actually uses it. It should not have like zero views that nobody's actually looking at it. So what requirement gathering normally looks like is, what people tend to ask is, what data do you want to see, is what I've seen mostly, rather than asking what decisions do they want to make. And I think there's like a big gap when you ask these questions, because most of the times people are not asking that, hey, can you build me a sales dashboard? Or for example, can you build me, for example, a dashboard that would just show me some numbers? What they really want to know is, can I rely on this dashboard to make the decision, to drive outcomes, to make sure that whatever decisions I make on the base of it, it's actually informed. So a lot of times, the question I've seen people asking in several times is like, what data do you want to see? Is a very common question. Other things that I've seen is this: just put everything on one page, which usually means things are unclear. That means they don't know what they want. So actually, the question that should be asking is, which three things matter the most? But most people will just say, just put everything and make a dashboard. Or the other question is, make it like the report finance uses. Now, finance team cares about different metrics. You can't build a report which is similar to finance team for a sales team or a marketing team or an operations team, right? So there is no discussion around like what different things you want to create. You just run on assumptions. So it's important to validate the requirements that you get from the user. And the third thing I've seen is, we'll figure out the rest of it later, which almost all the time leads to scope creep. And it's like, see, I like having a scope when you build a dashboard, but without complete, I mean, if you don't have any outline at all, then I don't know what we are really creating. So most people don't document what they decided in the start, and they then explicitly don't build what was asked for. And then in the end, what really happens is like, hey, we have a great dashboard, we have all the great features, it can drill down, it can filter, it can have slicer, but still like the views or the page views are really zero. So these are some of the examples of what I've seen, but obviously there are more examples. So normally what happens is like, when we think about a requirement checklist, a lot of time people don't think about what requirements they want to take. The 5 main things they should really be thinking about is, first, the audience. Who am I building for? Second is the decisions. What decisions are the people who are going to use this dashboard trying to make? Are they trying to increase sales? Are they trying to drive revenue? Are they trying to ensure they know which product is actually bringing the most money? Then third is, what metrics do they really care about? Like, I've seen a dashboard which had 21 different KPIs. And when I asked people, the people who are building or using, I was like, do you know like which particular KPI is actually important to you? They're like, we just use all of them. I'm like, how are you like driving any outcome with all these 21 metrics? And the dashboard had like blocks of KPIs one after other. So the key point is like, they did not know what their key metrics are, what particular things they are actually caring about or looking for. Then data sources. Now, this is a very crucial part, because people who are going to build, they don't know where the data is going to come from. Half of the things are running on assumption because they never do that due diligence to know if that data exists. If that data doesn't exist, how we're going to create that metric. So this step is never really done enough to ensure that we promise it, but we don't know the data is there or not. And then lastly, what's a success criteria? So after all this, let's say you build a dashboard, everybody is using it, and everybody wants to see it. The main thing is, what is defined as a success criteria for the dashboard? Like, is it gonna be the number of views? Is it gonna be that dashboard actually helps them make decision? What's the success criteria the customer, which means your stakeholder, has taken into mind? And more or less, I've seen one or the other of this is skipped or it's not considered, which almost all the time leads to a point where half of the work is done, months are spent, but it's not really conclusive in nature. So it's important to ensure these things are taken into account. So we'll go by these one by one and then move forward. So let's talk about what is your audience. So let's take an example here. Now you're working in a big organization. Now, obviously, there are different hierarchies, different people, right? Now, let's say you are working and you're building your dashboard for an exec, right? Now, in exec case, like they care about big picture. They want to know my main KPIs. These are the 4 or 5 things. This is my scorecard. These are the trends I want to see. What is the business impact? They don't want to first care about every single minor detail because that's the area they are looking for. They are looking just high level. Now, then you can think about a second person who is probably like a mid-level manager or somebody who is a product manager looking at specific areas. Now, in this case, what happens is like they're looking for performance drivers or comparison metrics or for example, things that can tell them their product or their line of business. Is it performing good or bad compared to others? How is it performing in relation to last year, or things like that? And the third level, for example, is somebody who is analytical in nature. Now, these people are detail oriented. They want to know about exploration, deep dive. So now these three levels care about different things altogether. So you can imagine that what each of them needs is basically different at all levels. The important key point is here is like, this is an example, but in real world, there are way more levels, way more different types of users. There could be different teams, cross-functional teams, or it could be possible that your exec level dashboard is actually a wider group, maybe 15 people, 16 people, who have a set of metrics. So it's important to understand first who is your real audience and what they really care about. And without that, building dashboard is just gonna be something you build, but it's highly possible it might not end up the way you expect it to be. The second thing from there is, how do you decide the business questions to your report goals? So if you get an input, something like, which I have gotten in the past, we need a dashboard for tracking customer engagement. Now, this is one of the input I got in the past. And how does it really translate? It's a very vague question. It's basically these 5 Ds. Firstly, what decision it will make, which means what's the cadence, what's the goal of this dashboard. Second is data. What answer is basically needed, which means 2 to 5 core metrics or slices that you will put on this dashboard. The third thing is display, which means how your answer should appear. Do they want a visual layout? Do they want a table? Do they want multiple report pages? How much detail they are looking for? Because almost every time I've been a part of a project or I've worked on project, I've seen people, can we download Excel from this dashboard? And I'm like, because that will totally defeat the purpose of building it, right? So a lot of times people who built this dashboard before me, they have facilitated that. So it's important to understand what's the visual type or layout they're looking for. Then the fourth thing is delivery, which means like who, when, and how basically will use it. Is it gonna be a specific set of people? As I said in the previous slide, what time do they need a dashboard? What refresh times they're looking for? One question I've always received is like, how frequently this dashboard gets refreshed? And like most of the time, it's always wiser to have something on a dashboard that indicates that, which means what's the last time it was refreshed. And then lastly, it's basically how do we measure the success criteria, which means like, what's your launch list? Which means once you have built the entire dashboard, how will it be launched with the group that you're creating? So essentially what the output you're gonna get is more like a scoped decision grid report rather than building something which is more faster, but not trustworthy enough. So if you start building dashboard, these are the 5 things you should be first thinking about before riding like into the journey of, hey, I got this data, I know this metric, I have, for example, this tool available to me and I'll just build it. So it's important to think these things in mind. Now from here, let's talk about wireframing. Now wireframing, I know a lot of people, a lot of people don't do it intentionally, but it's a really, really, like I would say, simple way of sketching out essentially how do you want to create a layout. And most of the time, what it does is it forces you to think that this is how I want this dashboard to look like. This is the vision. And what ideally happens is like, for example, I worked in consulting. So we used to build these sketches and we used to first present them before jumping onto building the dashboard to ensure that what they want versus what we are building is aligned. So that at the end, it's not like, can we change this color? Can we change this design? So you can use a lot of tools that are available. You can use as simple as pen and paper, but if you're going obviously for customer presentations, you cannot use that. So maybe use PowerPoint or Figma or Miro, or we have Claude Design right now if you want to use that as well, which we will see later. So wireframing really, really ensures that your vision, whatever you think in your head about how your dashboard should look like, it actually like comes into a form before you actually build it. It's actually low effort work in a way, and it actually is more impactful. So what are the features of a good wireframe? Now, it doesn't mean you just create something. It also means that there should be some nuances to it, which means it should have a page structure and navigation flow, how it will flow from one point to another, because that's exactly how a user will also navigate. Second is placement of KPIs, how you're going to place it. What's the design, layout, what filters, and what kind of visuals will be used. The third is what kind of charts. Are you going to show your trend lines using line chart? Is it going to be a bar chart? Or is it something which is going to be more like key performance indicator indicating growth or drop month over month or year over year? Then the fourth one is hierarchy, which means like, what is the thing user will see first? Do you have an exact summary page? Do you have an overview page or not? And then, for example, last bit is like any notes on interaction, like do you have drill throughs, tool tips, or any kind of bookmarks that facilitate their journey when they use a dashboard. So now I'm going to pause for a minute and I'm going to show. So this is Cloud Design. How many people have used Cloud Design here? Only one. You okay? Two people, which is fine. So Cloud Design is basically, it was launched a couple of weeks back, and I think it's really good for very fast prototyping. I only spent a couple of minutes prototyping this thing, and I was trying to just figure out what to build, like what a sales dashboard should look like. So essentially what you can do is you just have to give a detail about like what kind of wireframe we are trying to create with accurate description of what it should look like. It started building, it started picking 4 different layouts. So it has basically this one. This is the second one, which is basically with the side navigation. Then this is a third one, which is more like grid layout. And then the fourth one is more like a dark header. Now I played around with it a lot because I wanted a perfect colored theme. And I basically ran a second run in which I asked it to give a color, which means probably this light purple color. And I wanted to keep it consistent, the font, the design. So it ran all the bits for me. It basically verified all the agents, checked all the messages, and started building it accordingly. Now, I also wanted to make sure that whatever I create, the design is actually doable also. It's not just like, hey, I've built this great wireframe. I can't actually translate that into real world. So I ensured that the font, background, the panels are actually doable in whatever tool I use. For example, I'm using Power BI, so I can do all these things in Power BI. And it basically gave me all the details on the left, if you see, essentially about how it ran, what logic it picked. And I also made the theme a lot more lighter. It gave me a very black gray theme in the start. I made it more purple in color. Now, other things you can do is you can use a markup here, or you can also edit this one. If you want to edit, you can change things specifically on one layout, or you can also show tweaks. So basically you can change the accent color by picking a color here, or you can also use, for example, a dashboard background color through that, or you can also make it more normal or spacious or solid, and you can just close it basically on whichever layout you want to pick. Then you can also add comments. So if you're working with somebody or collaborating with somebody, you can add some comments if they want to see and review it. So I would say all in all, it basically helps you to ensure that, like, if you are not willing to put effort, for example, or spend time on using Figma or some other tool, you can just use it for prototyping really fast. And it saves a lot of time. You can also present it using this present button in a tab, for example, like this, and you can just go back using escape key. So this is a simple way of designing wireframe as well. So now from here, I'm going to go to the next slide, which is going to be about layouts. So layouts are basically structures. So now, for example, the left one is an example of a very rough sketch of a wireframe built on an iPad, right? Now, maybe I don't want to create something like this. Maybe I want to place my KPIs like this, or maybe I want to place 3 to 4 charts. So maybe I would want to place one chart here, a third or fourth chart here, or maybe I want to create this layout where essentially I have 4 of the blocks on the top and maybe like create 4 subsections in the bottom. So layouts basically are the way your visuals are placed on your dashboard. Now, it depends on how many charts or how many KPIs you would normally want. Normally, I recommend using 3 to 5 KPIs on a page and also having very specific charts or layout as well. But again, it depends on, sometimes people I've seen, they place a lot more charts, like they use 7, 8 charts, which I won't personally recommend, but like a lot of people still do it because that's what people ask for, or the stakeholders ask for. So layouts help to ensure that you know where to place which visual in your entire dashboard. And this is massively useful because it helps to decide how the layout will look like, how the flow will look like, how the user will see. Now, another aspect of viewing the layout is also having this design principle. So I normally recommend using this one. It's very popular in the UX design world. So it's called the inverted pyramid principle, which means like you keep the most important information on the top, anything supporting on the second layer, which is like more like a breakdown. And then you have more like explore layer at the bottom. So this is like how I generally structure it. So if you read on the left, if you want to, it's basically a very simple top to bottom flow. So anything on the top is going to be your KPI, headline filters, basically telling what's the current status of the key situation. So imagine you have a sales data and you want to see what's the current situation of my business, how the sales are progressing. So this is the first level you would want to keep your data on, like the sales on the top. So it will basically give you an idea of essentially roughly, okay, my business, this are the sales for this year. Now my problem is I want to figure out why the sales are not probably like at the baseline level. So then probably you will think about more looking at trends and comparison, which is like the second layer, where you are seeing what's happening over time against or against any targets if you have, for example, already set for your business, for your data or something. And then last third layer is like detail or breakdown, which is basically where you can dig deeper. So this is the layer you can provide more details. Like if you have a small structured, maybe like if you want to put some tables or if you want to add some more detailed data, like the third layer is basically where you place that. Now it can go step by step on your dashboard, or you can also create like the first two layer together, which means like you have KPIs on the top and then charts on the second layer, and then maybe you create a drill through feature in which the explore page is basically behind. So this basically mirrors naturally how users scan and they interpret information, because they first need to know, okay, this is a dashboard, what's the key message here? And then they will go from there wherever they want to go. If they want to see product, if they want to see what's happening with the revenue every month, that's how they will move around. So this is very, I would say, relatively simple to implement design principle for designing your dashboard. It really ensures that you know, like you know your data very well. You know that what your customer really wants. And I would say like if you implement this, it's really straightforward to implement most of the time. Now, how do you design patterns also? So this is like something again I highly recommend. It's also very popular again in like UI UX design. So if your dashboard is designed, so let's say this is your layout, it should either have a Z pattern or an F pattern. So the Z pattern basically is used on pages that are not text heavy, which means your dashboard does not have too much text or too much information. So users will first read from the top left and then they will come towards the bottom, which is like normally like the design you would want to go for if in your dashboard. If you can't implement this one, you can go for this one, which is basically again like where users read in a horizontal pattern, they move to the upper part and then they start exploring step by step. I think somebody asked me, I think a couple of months ago, I presented this somewhere, and they asked me, can it, if somebody is reading from left to right or right to left, can we implement the F layout for that as well? So a lot of languages and people, they read from left to right. So like a lot of people I've seen, they also implement inverted F, which means like these 3 or 4 KPIs are basically on the right side versus on the left side. So you can do that. However, I have not implemented that. But if you want to implement that, you can. I generally recommend going this way around rather than the other way around. So make sure like when you design your dashboard, you know what pattern you want to follow, how your visual placement is. Now, a lot of times people undermine and they think that I'll just make a dashboard, I have the right data, and that's gonna be all it. But it doesn't look professional. It doesn't look client ready. It doesn't look neat enough for them to use. A lot of times it's a massive problem because like a lot of dashboards are built, but as I said, like half of them don't get used. So these are two of the patterns that you can use if you want to design your dashboard. Now, when we talk about choosing the right visual, so obviously I'm sure everybody here already knows a lot about it, but I'm gonna just really briefly touch on it. So if you want to choose the right visual, you should first know what kind of data you have. Do you have categorical data or do you have continuous data? And then what does your data want, like what do you want to use your data to tell? So if you're showing comparison, let's say, which means like I have 7 weeks of data, 7 days of data, or last 12 months of data. So maybe I use bar chart, maybe I can show trend lines using line chart. If I have relational data, maybe I can use bubble chart also. But then like for correlation, for example, correlation is very, I would say, specific. You can use bubble chart or you can use column line or scatter plot for that. Like very few data sets I've seen people implementing correlation. Then let's say you have distribution, which means like, let's say a case where like you want to show how many users came 24 hours in a day. So you want to show distribution of users over the course of time. So then maybe you can use grouped bars or you can use bubble charts for that. Then let's say if you want trying to show rankings, like you have rank data, which is again a specific case, you can use ordered bar or decomposition tree to make sure that essentially every single step is clear, like what kind of data has to be used. Another thing I want to mention is when you build the right visuals, essentially, for example, these are 2 donut chart. Now, if you see the left one, it has these grayish black lines and the left one doesn't. This one, and also the color is dark blue, which is completely off theme. Now, if you have to pick between the 2 of them, which one will you pick? Obviously the left one. simply because this line is unnecessary. It's just adding weight on the visual. And also the colors that are used, they're not in line or sync with what, for example, the branding or the theme of your dashboard would look like. So like these are small changes on the visuals which actually make a lot of difference, because every single chart, if you create it like this, if you imagine 5 charts like that, it's not something that looks really professional, or also doesn't look something which is, I would say, your stakeholder would actually like. Then unnecessary elements. For example, this is just like a random trend line. Now, the things I would not put is grid lines on the back of this chart, or these labels with the background that are present. Or for example, if I don't need to specify access title at all, I would like omit them. So now grid lines, I personally never recommend grid lines because they just make the chart look too busy, or these grayish colors on the back. So it's important to make sure that you understand like what are the unnecessary elements in your chart, and you are able to remove those unnecessary elements from the charts that you create. The next one is this one, which is basically an example of having a column chart. Now, in this one, in the left one, I have given these purple bars. Now they are all in the colors, same color theme, right? Now this one has a very bold black outline. They also have a very like background grayish colors. What it does is it basically creates an overload on the chart. It's very cluttered. And like a lot of times I've seen people also use icons. They also use infographic styling, which is cluttered really, because like it doesn't really add value. What really adds value is making things less complicated and keeping things simple a lot of times when you build dashboards. And a lot of times these nuances are not taken care of because in people's mind they're making it look nicer, because I think if I'll add more like small patterns, it will actually look better or nicer. Now I'm going to show one dashboard, for example, which was built by someone. So for example, if you see this dashboard on the screen, right, it was built by someone, and I will tell you the problems I see in this dashboard right now. So, okay, overall, it's still acceptable dashboard. It has a color theme, it has a chart, it has some slices and filters. Now, the couple of things which this dashboard does not offer is like, I don't know why pedestrians involved is in caps on. Like, I don't know what value it is adding, but it's putting definitely a weight. The values are a lot more in bold, which don't need to be in bold. Now, the color theme slightly varies here. For example, here there are shades of blue, but this one here, it has more darker shades, for example. So for me, it's a different color altogether. It doesn't align very well with the theme. They could have used this white space here more smartly, like rather than keeping this space blank. It doesn't, overall, it doesn't align with the theme and branding. If like there are some components of this dashboard which you can say are great, while some component of this dashboard would basically need improvement in a way. Now, for example, if you see this chart, they have given like total accidents by age group. Now, in this one, what really happens is like, although they try to sort this axis by the age group, which is obviously one of the ways to do it, what it really does is like if you have to check every single age group, you have to scroll down. So might be better to either create something which is more targeted. Maybe like people don't want to see all the age groups. Maybe they want to see more like a distribution. So what it really does is it creates that like there's a gap between what great looks like and what just good looks like. And there are small changes that this dashboard could have, which could actually have made a lot more difference in the way it looks right now. Now, going back to my slides again, some design patterns that build trust. Now, this slide I was not going to add, but then I added because I wanted to emphasize, because I've not seen a lot of people doing it. So these are 4 of them: consistency, white space, hierarchy, accessibility. So we talked about white space. We'll discuss a bit more. So consistency. Now you have 2 sets of data which are of the same category, which means they belong to the same product type. Now I've seen this a lot. Like people, they place these 2 things together, but the way they represent is different. So now in the user's mind, it's like they're 2 different things, but actually they belong to the same category. So ideally in real world, you should always keep things that belong together in the same format, which means if you have a column chart, if you have a value, if you have a trend line, they should be same for the same set of data that you present. So that is the first thing, which is consistency. The colors, fonts, and the format should remain same throughout. Second thing about consistency is also it should be same across pages. So if your report, like the one I showed, has multiple pages, a lot of times the consistency is not same, which means the colors, the fonts are different. And it's a big problem because if you make revenue one color on one page and then maybe another color on second page. For somebody, it's two different things. They're not really the same thing anymore. So consistency across pages is really important. Then second is typography, which means like, or typography, which means like your fonts, your weights, the sizes. Like if you're using 9 or 10 or 12, they should be same across the board. Simply because if you are using like a pixel font, for example, at a certain level on one chart, then you change it on another, they're not really the same thing. And then lastly is format consistency, which is basically like the format, the way you have designed a dashboard, the layout. If possible, try to keep it same, because nobody can tell if those two numbers or the values you have taken, they are the same thing, which is the bigger problem, the biggest problem I've seen. Like changing the format creates a lot of confusion for people. Like it is useful if you are building, for example, singular reports for different people, but not if you are targeting one set of audience across pages, different pages. Now, second thing is hierarchy. Now, hierarchy means basically it guides your eyes to what matters. Now, you see the left one and the right one. The left version treats every single value same, like revenue, order, customer, AOE, everything is same. What's the key metric here on the left one? If you think there is no key metric, like key value here, because all of them are equally same, right? What I should be looking for in the right one, if you see, because this 2.4 million is way more bigger in size, I've given like the change in quarter, the position of these two values. I'm actually telling somebody that this big number matters versus the left one, because in the right one, I've muted the colors of orders, customers, and AOV, and that creates a really clean reading order versus the left one where everything is equal. So basically, in the left one, I'm saying all things are important. Revenue is important, the orders is important, the customers is important, and so on. So hierarchy is usually good if you want to guide to your user what really matters. The next one is white space, which I showed on the dashboard. There was a lot of white space. So the left one, if you see, it packs everything together. There is no margin. There is nowhere your eyes can rest in the left one. Versus the right one, it has section gaps, a small gap. Now, when we talk about white space, it's not like you give 3 lines of white space. It means small white spaces in which you can actually relax. Your eyes can actually see the gaps from one to another, because your report should not look too cluttered where like everything is just next to another as well. And then lastly, accessibility. Accessibility, obviously, like it's talked a lot and discussed a lot. So it's really important as well. Whatever colors, contrast you use, because a lot of people, they need to have accessible reports. So it's important that you keep track of if your report's accessible or not. So obviously this session, I'm not gonna go detail into it, but if you see the left chart and the right one again, left is like, doesn't really tell anything. And I've seen a lot of times that accessibility failures, they happen to a lot of reasons, because it could be a low contrast text people have placed, it could be color indicators which are not labeled properly, or it could be any missing labels on the chart. So what happens is like people, they are not able to absorb what information there is. For example, in the right one, if you see, there is at least detail of like what is on track, what is at risk. In the left one, it's unclear, because these dots don't really mean anything. So make sure that accessibility is something you also think about if you're building user-friendly reports. Now, let's say if you reach a phase where you reach the final stage, which is production. Now, this is the area where everything is done. And this is the area where like, hey, my report is ready and good to go. I'm going to deploy it now. Now, this is the phase where you have to make sure you are building a dashboard for success. This and after a couple of, so we have, I think, 2-3 slides on this one. So first thing I always recommend is like document your sources and refresh schedules. And you should know what the key measures are. Because if you are working, if you're in a consulting world, if you work, these things are needed. And set up a row level security if needed, because different people, they give different level of access. Mostly like to derive adoption, because your users might not know how to use a tool. For example, if somebody doesn't know how to use Power BI, then it's your role to present a demo or training or feedback around how they can use it. Essentially what views, what unique users or feedback volume they're expecting from this dashboard. So make sure these things are ready by the time you reach your deployment/production level. Now, what's a post-launch iteration? So once you have created the production level report, what's your post-launch iteration? So firstly, like success can look a lot different for a lot of different people, but mostly you should monitor the usage of your reports. For example, if you're using Power BI, you can use Power BI service for that. So you can schedule check-ins, for example, at different intervals of time to make sure you know that, hey, if I build this dashboard, somebody's actually using it or not. So this is the Power BI service. You can see here views viewers, shares, how many people are actually visiting it every day. Is it consistent? Is it dropping? What's really happening? And if you don't know how to go there, you can just use like view usage metrics to basically look at it. Now, I want to emphasize in this slide that the reports that evolve with the user are the ones that win the long-term trust. A lot of times dashboards are built and they just like basically kept on maintenance. Like for example, people build it, but they don't look at it like 6 months, 5 months, 4 months. Metrics change, tables changed. Probably the users don't even look at those metrics anymore. So you need to make sure that you keep in touch with them and you know that what's the new thing coming in your data. Does that need to be a part of your report or not be a part of report? And if you make any changes, communicate them effectively as well, because if you make a change and that's not communicated to someone, they wouldn't really know what version of report they're using. So that's why making sure that having the backlog of all these changes is really the important part. Now, this slide is like, I think I added because this question was asked to me a couple of months back by someone. How do we measure success? I think this is the most asked question. At least for me, I have received this question a lot of times in like various interactions I have been a part of. Now, no, like there is no golden rule. There is not like, hey, this is gonna work for everyone, but something amongst this will work. So firstly, like what you can do is if you are in a very customer facing world, surveys or feedback, ask your audience if they got the key message from the data that you have prepared or the dashboard you have prepared. That's the first thing. Second is time spent on the dashboard. Does it have any views at all? I've seen dashboard, 0 views in 6 months. Nobody looked at it, or even like 2 views in 1 month, like 1 month. Then I can't say really, right? 15 people are supposed to use it, but it's only having 2 views. Why? So time spent on the dashboard, if somebody's looking at it over time. The third is interaction rate, which means like, are people actually using clicks, filters, drill downs? Do you know that? Are you tracking that kind of information? Like if they are interacting at all with your dashboard, because that will also come from your shares, from the way they are like using it. They will tell you as well on these things if they are actually interacting with it. Then very big part, fourth one, ROI. What is like the time and effort spent on dashboard justified by the outcomes? When we talk about ROI, it also comes from a lot of things. For example, has your dashboard reduced the dependency on reactive work, i.e. like if you're raising tickets, like Jira tickets, or if they're using reactive reporting mechanism. So make sure you know what time and effort you've invested in building it versus what they're actually trying to gain out of it. It's a very common question. It is asked all the time. And then lastly, sharing. So was a dashboard shared with anyone? If you're working, for example, in a big organization, normally if your work is great, it gets shared with other people. Nobody shares something if it's not great. So if it's getting shared with other people, was that something done across the department, across groups? Because normally if you are doing something, build something great dashboard, people do tend to use it. So there are different ways you can measure the success of your dashboard, different criteria. You can make like a whole set of report to ensure that it's actually something that can be quantified and can also be like made more available or used to other people. Then one more thing I want to mention is running effective feedback sessions. So this is something which was asked to me, hence it's on the slide. So a lot of time this happens, like I think with a lot of people, that they go to customers and they have these sessions where they want to understand if whatever they have built is going to be used. So I think the things people ask sometimes is not what they want to hear. So what you can do is you can ask more open-ended feedback. Things like, for example, don't ask what do you think, ask questions. For example, like, can you find answers to your questions? Or for example, which visuals you find most useful, which will tell you where the driving force sits in your dashboard. Or for example, what would you remove if you have the chance to remove from this dashboard? They will tell you exactly if you hear properly. And then who else on your team probably is using this or should see this? Because otherwise what happens is like they will look at a part of dashboard, they would not look at every single. So you have to ensure that you are driving it every single point end to end to ensure that they are looking at your dashboard that you have created. And it's kind of key because like I've seen people asking what do you think, which is very vague because it is not gonna give you any solid answer. Because like what do you think is like, yeah, the weather is great today, it's sunny, but it's not the question they probably are looking for. So one more thing I want to show before I think I'm almost on the end of my session is like, so this is my example, right? I got a I got a version of a dashboard a couple of months back, which was like not not good. Like not good in the sense like had no layout, nothing. So this is like I would say this is like an intermediate version of the final dashboard. Obviously, I can't show the whole version, but in this one, what they really wanted is like they just wanted to focus on a couple of bits, which means like 4 or 5 things. So if you look at this, it's like I would say somewhere in the intermediate stages of how you would build something. Like it has a key layout, which means like it's forming a Z layout. It has a key color theme, which means it sticks to gray, black, and this light purplish color. It has some summary on the top left, which basically tells them that, hey, what this dashboard is going to be about. You can obviously create a separate page. People create glossary and a dictionary also. I've seen that also on dashboards, which you have feel free to do that. But let's say if you don't want to do that, you can add some small messages on your dashboard as well. Another thing which I find interesting here is like every single time there is a header, there's a small subtitle explaining what the chart is about, what it's giving. So if I'm somebody who has never seen this dashboard before, I will still able to grasp in probably like a couple of minutes or maybe less than a couple of minutes that what the dashboard is all about. Now it has some small minor changes which somebody should do, which is like the average discount does not have a percentage sign, things like that. Maybe the trend line could have been slightly more focused on the last couple of months of view because it's just too busy. Or for example, like they could also have added year over year or month over month growth, for example, in different areas. Now, this I would say like if you rate it on a scale, it would still need some more improvements to ensure that you are building a dashboard which is more like user friendly versus like what somebody would look at. And in the bottom, they've also given a dashboard refresh data, which is basically they're telling that it refreshes at 7 a.m. every day. And they provided a status, for example, it's completed, which if I were building it, I would probably put somewhere on the top left simply or top right, basically, because I know this question gets asked a lot. Unless and until you have some other mechanism that's communicating to the people that, hey, like this dashboard is getting update at this time every day. Now, Power BI facilitates you to refresh a lot more than that. Like you can do it 4, 5, 6 times, and you can like depending on your data and the industry you are in. So if you are working in which a historical data is refreshed once a day is okay, then you can just schedule once. But maybe you are working in a more real-time situation, then you might want to use more real-time analytics for that to ensure that like you get data every single hour, maybe every 30 minutes or so. So this is one of the examples I also want to show before I close my session. I think there's some slides left. So going back to the feedback again, when feedback comes to you, like in an organization or in a group, a lot of time people just rush to fix everything. Simple criteria should be just must fix, which is basically the main part. Should fix and nice to have is great, but you don't have to put them. It depends on your discussion also, because you can also explain them why do you think it's not a good idea to place that in the first place. But if you just go about fixing everything, it might break the usability of your report simply because it's designed with an agenda in mind or with a goal in mind. So I would recommend people to not rush into just prioritizing feedback and rushing into building it. Just also think from your own brain that, hey, is that actually going to be worth it for somebody who is going to be using it as well? And some common pitfalls is like, firstly, like you can read on the screen, but I want to give my some last words before I end. Is like launching without documentation or training is like a gray area in the sense like you don't know the user knows that tool or not. So if you want to ensure, please give training. Then treat your stakeholder feedback not as a one-time event, but as a continuous system, because at the end of the day, the users need to use it. So focus on them versus on focusing that, hey, I've got one-time feedback, it's good for me, I'm not gonna go back again and ask any more questions. Then also like skipping wireframe, if you have complete clarity, like if you know what you're trying to build is okay, but then you're investing more energy into building dashboard in the first 2 steps, which can be a lot more work towards the end if you have to change it. And I'm not talking about just taking an Excel CSV and plugging it into the Power BI. I'm just talking about like having real-time data, because it's a lot of like effort to build like a long big dashboard. And then lastly, like always, I would say prioritize clarity over complexity. So I'm going to give an example here. I saw one dashboard where they have used a map when the map was not needed. And the map was only because they said the map looks great because it gives me those, the colored sections. And they had this map and I was like looking at it and I was like, this shows nothing, because it's just colored and if you like have hover over it, there's like some tooltip text on the top. But I was like, this doesn't really tell you anything. You might just rather be good, using maybe like just a table, because if your goal is to look something very specific, then yes, let's do it. So I gave them another version of the same dashboard but without the map. Now then they were like, oh, this is so easy to read. I was like, I was telling this thing before, because using map is only useful in certain cases. It might not facilitate your process all the time. So don't choose complex visual. Maybe try to keep things simple for starters, because sometimes the users don't know, and maybe you have to give them that vision that, hey, this is another way of approaching the same situation. And last but not the least, like ultimately focus on keeping things as minimal, which means like 3 to 5 KPIs maybe on the front page, limited set of charts, having maybe 3 to 5 max filters if needed, and then also making sure you know the design pattern, which I showed in the slide. Like, are you using a Z layout? Are you using an F layout? Or like, how do you want to place your visuals effectively? So these are some of the resources if you want to use to learn more about accessibility, some new feature summaries for Power BI, any specific things about Power visualizations as well. And finally, to conclude my session, these are some of the key takeaways that I have. I think I've covered most of it. The only thing I would want to emphasize is like probably emphasize context. So I think this is more around the part where you've already built a dashboard. So like a lot of people, if you would have heard, they say like, what's the story in your data? Like, what's the story of your dashboard? Which is like the so what part of it. And the so what part comes only after you understand the context of why and what they care about or they're looking for. So if somebody asks you someday that, hey, like you have this great dashboard, you have this great data, but I don't see any story there. So like make sure you have deep understanding of the domain you are in, and then emphasize that level of context for them, simply because that's where the edge comes in, like the part where like people want to be like, oh, this is really something. And the other thing is like always start with the user is what I recommend. Don't start with your building mindset, start with them, and also speak their language. So don't use any technical jargons on the dashboards, because they might not know. So if they know, then hey, great. But if they don't, then avoid using any technical jargons at all. And then lastly, I always like say that data trustworthiness is really, really important, because it's a very common problem. Always show last updated timestamps or refresh rates. Flag any data under review. If you are not confident any data on a dashboard is wrong or it's not right, you can put a small note or flag on it that this is under review if they're still using it, simply because it's no benefit having a table or a chart on a dashboard that is probably not right or wrong, because it just compromises user trust altogether. So you might just want to save yourself and be like, I'm like telling upfront, this is something I'm looking into, it's not quite there. And yeah, with that my session comes to an end. This is me if you want to connect, and if you have any questions, I guess we have some time. Yeah, thank you.
Perfect. I'm in presenter mode and it's extending to that screen. Yep. Whoops. Oh, weird. Yeah, you're right. I wasn't doing that before. Is it maybe because the other speaker was connected? Yeah, we're good. Ready to get started? Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome today. So the talk I'm going to be giving is more focused on Power BI governance rather than reporting and storytelling. And really, the title is Power BI governance, the foundations matter more than ever, right? So before we get into the content, though, very quickly, just a quick intro to me. Who am I? So my name is Lazaros Viastikopoulos, but it's very Greek, very long, so everyone just calls me Laz to keep it simple. Founded Metis BI 2 years ago, everyone. So we're a Power BI and Fabric consultancy, primarily working with UK clients. What do we do? In reality, we really focus into data governance, right? Building high-value solutions, that's our area. How do we build solutions that are tied to business objectives, where at the end we can measure the ROI as well, all the way from performance, Microsoft Fabric, and many other things. Before that, I used to be the head of analytics and Power BI at Telefonica Tech Data and AI, started the Power BI practice there. Apart from that, in the industry for 10 years now, and regularly try to speak in as many events as possible. So that's a quick intro to me and Metis BI, everyone. Also, feel free to visit our website. You can see a lot more information. We do blog a lot, and I promise it's not AI written. It's personally written by us, right? And we try to blog on a weekly basis. So that's me. Now, let's get into the content. So I've given versions of this talk over the years. In fact, the last time I gave this talk was back in 2019, right? Before ChatGPT, before Claude, before Copilot and Microsoft Fabric. I can't imagine a world without it right now, right? Basically, before AI, I'm sure you can all appreciate this, before AI was in every conversation we was having, right? And here's the thing. The AI conversation keeps popping up a lot, right? And when we go down the AI conversation, it usually naturally leads to the AI strategy. And then when we go through the AI strategy and we start going through it, we start to think, interesting, ownership, trust, access, security, nailing down definitions, etc. All these things were items from the data strategy that we always had. And even more so, if I look at it purely from a Power BI lens, may I say the Power BI governance strategy also, right? And as I said, we've been seeing this for a while now as well. And if we take an example like a semantic model, everyone, the semantic models previously mattered. Of course they did, back in 2019, right? They were really important for building our reports or a suite of reports on top of the model. But right now, can I say they're even more important with AI? Because right now, we're asking for a lot of NLP, Copilot, Genie, whatever it is, right? I focus on Microsoft Copilot, of course. We need to add it on top of that. So we can argue that the semantic model now and various different other elements, the underlying foundations, they're still there. We still need to build that foundation that we always needed to build. But the consequences of not building it right now are a lot higher as well. And we'll see that as the slide progresses. Okay? So why does this matter? Why does all this matter? Well, you've probably seen this as well. AI is a multiplier, AI is an amplifier. I haven't come up with this term. But the point I'm trying to make all is this, right? AI cannot fix your governance, right? And we see it time and time again. In fact, it will just scale it. Reality is this. If you have a good governance foundation, everyone, so think about your semantic models have been configured correctly. You haven't rolled out everything as a big bang approach to the entire organization, right? You've spent time empowering, enabling the end users, guiding them, right? You had the right conversations around access, security, etc. All lovely things that we're going to speak about more later on. If you do all that, then AI will take all those trusted answers and push them out to more people. But on the flip side, if you have a weak governance foundation, so really the opposite of what I just said, your semantic models haven't been configured correctly. You haven't nailed down the definitions. You haven't asked some of the important questions around access and security. You haven't put the right processes. You haven't helped your end users. And that's one of the key parts I want to emphasize later on as well. Well, AI will take those weaknesses and push them out to a larger group of people right now, because it can push out, or it can reach a larger group at a much faster speed. And then afterwards, we need to think about that false level of trust it can provide as well, because how well written the replies are in comparison to when someone might just view a report traditionally. And I've seen this, right? I'm not going to go into too much details, but I'm going to say we had an NLP AI assistant, I'm not going to mention, right? And the great thing about this particular scenario was we had that top level support, and that's really important. So the drive was there, and that already knocks off so many of the common challenges if that doesn't exist. And when we went down that path, we enabled it a bit too quickly. We didn't give the right level of support to the end users. We didn't showcase to them how it's different from how they would usually interact with reporting solutions. We started getting some wrong answers. People start losing the trust. And then slowly, the technology started to get the hit, or we thought, hey, it's the technology's fault. It wasn't. It's the underlying governance. That was the gap that was very much needed. So again, everyone, the point is we need that same foundation that we always had, but if we don't have it, the stakes, the consequences are a lot higher this time around. Now, I promise this is not an AI talk, all right? It's a Power BI governance talk, but it's really hard to avoid AI because it hugely overlaps. A lot of organizations, more and more, different people I'm speaking to on a weekly basis are asking about AI, whether it's aligned to some sort of ROI that they're trying to move towards is a different story as well, right? But they want it alongside Power BI and alongside Fabric, right? And like I said, many AI conversations, and when we go into these conversations, surprise, surprise, this is the slide I presented back in 2019, right? Yes, I tweaked it a little bit because some things naturally didn't exist, but we're still walking into this, right? Semantic models not configured correctly, right? We haven't nailed down the definitions. A proliferation of reports, semantic models, data flows, add Fabric in there as well. Let's remember, Power BI is now one workload, one experience of Fabric, many workloads in there. A workspace now has lakehouses, SQL endpoints, pipelines, notebooks, you name it, right? So again, even more of a reason to really nail down why we are doing this, right? So AI won't fix any of this all. Sure, it can assist in some places, but that foundation is what will help us prevent all of this and also put us in a better position if we do want to move into that AI space also afterwards. Okay, so really to nail down the why, because I want to move into the more practical things, right? This is the why. I want to move into the what could we be doing afterwards as well. There's three core reasons. I already stressed the point of AI, I think. Like I said, more people want it now, right? It's front and center. We want it alongside Power BI. We want Copilot enabled, right? There's this drive. There is genuinely a drive and a demand for Copilot, right? But again, in order to get that right, we have to have the foundation. We can't make it a rushed approach. Similar to self-service, right? Many people used to say self-service, still do. Self-service is dead. It's not dead. There's different variations of self-service that we could incorporate. And if we incorporate it correctly, the chances of success automatically increase. The other one is data centricity. Let's not forget, call it what you're going to call it. Data-driven, insight-led, data centricity, etc. More organizations want to become more data-driven. Many aspire to it, but many don't always get there, right? And again, the gap I'm finding is that governance layer. Even if the SLT team's promoting it, the governance layer is what makes all the difference. And then lastly, why the foundations matter more than ever. As I said, everyone, we now are touching a much larger surface area. Think what we used to do before, right? I'm sure everyone here has used Power BI. We open up Power BI desktop, pre-Microsoft Fabric, create a solution, publish, Power BI service, app.powerbi.com, Power BI cloud, right? And it will land in the workspace. And that will be our environment as Power BI developers, analysts, etc. But right now, if you have Microsoft Fabric enabled, things can get very messy very quickly, right? Depending, of course, on the level of access you're giving end users. But to summarize this, from an AI perspective, there is a much higher demand to set the foundation. People are expecting for us to be more data-driven. And Microsoft Fabric, everyone, has increased the surface area. So all these are 3 core reasons why the foundations matter more. Okay. So like I said, that's the why. Let's now get into the more practical stuff, right? Just very quickly, so I know how much level of detail to dive into here. Are we all aware of the deployment approaches? Just hands up if you know what these are. Okay, I'll go into some detail in that case. So, if you go on the Microsoft Fabric adoption roadmap, you'll see some of these, right? Now, some stuff might be termed differently because everything I'm going to share from here onwards is based on actual experience with clients and different organizations now and over the years as well, right? And if I go away a little bit from what the Microsoft docs say, I'll call it out also so you're aware of it. So what you're seeing on screen is the deployment approaches. In some places over the years, they'll call different things, but I'll stick to the correct terminology now. Enterprise BI, everyone, what is that? Think of your core reporting teams. Think of your data teams. Think of your BI teams, right? Basically, which is the central reporting team? They have full control and ownership of your semantic models and your reports. So you can imagine governance is really high, but flexibility for the business is quite low. And that gap, you can probably tell the pros and cons, right? That's what enterprise BI is. We then move into managed-led self-service BI. So now that's when we give some control, flexibility, ownership back to the business. And the way we do that is by enabling them to create their own reports, everyone, right? And please don't misunderstand this part as we give everyone self-service. I think that's where a lot of organizations go wrong. They think it's all or nothing, right? It shouldn't be all and it shouldn't be nothing. And we'll see that as we progress as well. Also, just to call out, maybe some of you have heard of something called, or Microsoft claim it as discipline at the core, flexibility at the edge. That's what enterprise BI is, discipline at the core. You're building a foundation. You're putting yourself in the best possible position to then transition into something else. Managed-led self-service BI is flexibility at the edge. You've given some control and flexibility back to the business, right? The other thing as well, everyone, you then move to business-led self-service BI. Now, that's when you give even more control and ownership to the business because not only can they start creating their own reports, they can also now start to create their own semantic models. Now, what we're going to do today is this. I'm going to take you from enterprise BI, 7 factors to consider whilst you're here, and then work our way down to managed-led, and we'll stop there. Very, very, very important. Microsoft nowhere promote you to use this as how I'm presenting it today as a sort of stepping stone approach, right? And I've worked with different organizations and we use different approaches, right? But from all the organizations I've helped, there's a clear pattern, everyone, right? Start with enterprise BI. If you're in that really chaotic environment, pull everything back, build that foundation, and then slowly release it back to the business. In the more recent scenarios just to prove a point, we started on managed-led self-service BI because people were already self-serving everyone and it was working. In fact, we was getting ready to start pushing it to business-led self-service BI afterwards because they had that foundation. The maturity was really high. They had the right people in the right places. Okay, so we're going to use this as a ladder approach. Start at the top. What are the things and the factors we should be considering? and then work our way down as well. Okay, so one more slide. So before the foundation, everyone, right? So think of this. This is where all those Power BI challenges are highlighted before. That's what we have before the foundation. Now, when I mean enterprise BI, that's what we want to build, right? We want to build a solid foundation, as I said, but in reality, what does that mean, everyone? Think about traditional BI, right? Beyond Power BI, just business intelligence. When I worked on it well before Power BI was even around, what were some of the BI qualities we wanted to embed into the foundation, into the organization, right? Version control, scalability, performance, right? Security, all these things. That's what I mean about embedding the foundation early on and then layering and building on top of that. Okay? So, one more point, I guess, to call out here on why. Go in there, building that puts you in the best possible position to then transition into self-service, right? Different flavors of self-service, but also to move into co-pilot enablement as well afterwards. Okay. So let's get into the factors. And the first one we're going to start off is with executive support, right? Just very quickly, so you're familiar with the slide, so you can see at the top, we start with executive support. We're going to go through 7 factors in total before we land in managed self-service BI. Again, different organizations I work with, or sometimes some of these factors we do a little bit later. The ones I'm going to introduce you to afterwards, we do a little bit earlier. It really, really depends on the organization. But again, these are the common patterns that I'm seeing, and I'm presenting it in this way. So starting off with executive support. If we're going to go on the journey of implementing Power BI governance, that's change, right? And people hate change. And I totally get it. I hate change sometimes as well, especially if they were doing the same thing for the last 3, 5, 6 years, following the same process. Whether that process was valuable or not, whether it had any benefit to the organization, the fact that they were doing it, it's still scary. And on top of that, everyone has their own targets, their own objectives, their own line managers, their own personal lives. The point I'm making is this all. If I come along afterwards and say, hey, we're making these changes, Power BI governance is important, that's a LAS objective. If you go along and do it, that'll be a U objective. If we do it as the BI team, the business will see it as a BI objective. We really need to promote this as an organizational objective. And I've been involved in too many bottom-up approaches, everyone. And I think I called it out, a losing battle, right? It's 1 step forward, 2 steps back. You need to have that top-down level support from a governance perspective. The BI team cannot hold that authority line, right? And that's why I put this as the #1 factor here. In fact, I feel so strongly about this from everything I'm seeing that all the other factors we're going to go through afterwards as well, right, are directly impacted by this. So a common question right now might be, okay, well, what does that look like? Well, it could be a group. It was a group once for us, but usually it's an individual. Someone that has to be more so in the more senior leadership team side, someone with authority, a bit of influence, a voice in the business, right? Someone who is not a data expert, by the way, right? They don't have to be an engineer or an analyst, but they understand the benefits data can bring to the organization. You're not going to find everything, right? Apart from that, it can't be someone that just says governance is important. Yeah, governance is important, and that's it. No, they have to promote it internally. Think about company updates. Think about monthly stand-ups. Think about internal collateral. Think about the way they operate. We need a person there to really say, listen, this is an organizational objective, everyone. We're all doing it together. It's part of the business strategy. We need to get behind it. So when you have maybe a group of people or a team of people afterwards come in and pushing back, sorry, we can't attend these meetings. We've got other priorities. Why should we follow this new process? We've always been going through this path. We can then say, it's not a BI objective here, guys, right? You cannot hold that authority line by yourself. If it's coming from top down, it will promote everyone to understand it's a business journey. We're all moving towards it as well. Okay? So that's why I put this as #1. Find that executive support, find that executive sponsorship internally. Okay, the next factor I want to talk about, trust, security, classification. So when we think of governance, right, I'm sure we're all the same here, what's the first thing that comes to mind? It's probably auditing, compliance, security, monitoring, and I'm not knocking it at all. Of course not. It's vital, it's important. But I'm just going to add a little note there to set me up for afterwards as well. What we usually dismiss is enablement and empowerment. And I feel governance cannot be implemented on a long-term basis unless we have those parts in here as well. But again, it's still important, so we're going to go through it. So what do I mean by trust, everyone? By trust, I mean the integrity of the data. So think about, we are implementing governance around a tool. The tool is Power BI. If we then push Power BI, promote Power BI, and then this has happened, we promote Power BI and the numbers aren't, we're already fighting an audience maybe that they're transitioning from something else, and Power BI offers incorrect numbers. Someone from finance comes along, accesses the report, compares it back to what they were previously using. They find the discrepancies. The reports on our side are the problem ones. Word gets out. The tool, well, the trust starts going down. And then governance gets hit before we even started. So the point I'm making is, make sure the integrity of the data in the tool, Power BI going out, is of high integrity as well. Make sure you have the right conversations early on. How do we maintain data integrity, right? The other one is security, right? We need to have the question, we need to ask the right questions. So it's not just about features that I've listed, right? We need to ask, what data do we have? Who should access the data? Do we have any data that's more sensitive than others? Who accesses that? What do we do with external sharing? Should we be sharing with external users? What happens if our internal employee shares data with someone accidentally outside of the organization? And once you have these conversations, you set the policies, then you start thinking about least privilege, multi-factor authentication, and all the other features, whether it's role level security, object level security, data masking, etc. Now with Fabric, of course, you also ask the question, where do we do it? Do we do it in the warehouse? Do we do it earlier? Do we do it in the semantic model? But again, just to not overcomplicate it, I'll look at it purely from a Power BI lens, right? The other one there, tenant settings. Or I get invited to many tenant settings, or over the years I've attended so many of these, and what do I find? I find a group of IT people coming in here and they're just looking to turn off everything. And whilst I understand why they do that, they try to mitigate the risk. If they mitigate the risk, all those common challenges that I showed you earlier will disappear. We need to put the guardrails and enable the end users, right? So don't let the tenant settings exercise, Fabric tenant settings, be we just go in there and we disable everything. And the last part, classificational. So on that, what do I mean by classification? So let's start off with endorsements. From an endorsement perspective, don't think of this as a security mechanism. It's not, right? A endorsement or classification in Power BI will not prevent someone from accessing the data. Think of it more as a stamp of approval, right? In traditional BI, before Power BI, we used to maybe create like a little icon and add it to our reports to say, hey, this has come from the core reporting team or the BI team, so people could trust it. So we have something called promoted and certified statuses, right? Think of the certified status in Power BI as the one that says this is the highest valued one or has the highest integrity. Microsoft traditionally didn't assign definitions to certified and promoted, and I quite like that because I always promoted clients and organizations. No, we should set the definition for these here as well. So if you're part of a core reporting team, you build a suite of semantic models, at the end, mark it as certified, right? It gets a little green badge of approval. And there's one more feature I haven't called out on the slide called discoverability, right? Goes hand in hand with this, right? It's all about democratizing our data as well afterwards. So if you have a semantic model, we feel confident in it, it's the right one, it's what we want the business to start using, what co-pilots start using as well, right? Mark it as certified. You can even make it discoverable. And that way it will appear in places like the One Lake Data Hub in the Power BI service. Doesn't mean it's giving access to people. It just lets people know it exists. They could request access. And then you have promoted, right? You need to set a policy on how this will be used. A big frustration from Microsoft is that we cannot disable this in the tenant settings. I wish we could in some scenarios. So just put a definition against it. And then lastly, all sensitivity labels is one important thing to consider, right? Now, in case anyone hasn't come across sensitivity labels, in a single sentence, what does it do? It extends security beyond Power BI. How good is that, right? So for example, I'm a Power BI user. I go into Power BI. I export some data out in a particular file format, and then I share it with an external user. That external user won't be able to see the data, right? Important thing, this is not configured in Power BI. Yes, we enable it, disable it in the Fabric tenant settings. The settings have grown. There's a lot of propagation settings in there now, how it automatically propagates from the top level down as well. But we have to do this in Microsoft Purview, right? So if you work purely on the Fabric side or Power BI side, have a word with your IT team. I'm sure they already are using sensitivity labels in Outlook, Office, Exchange, and other places as well. They may not know that exists in Fabric, right? So have the right conversation, see how you can bring it in. Like I said, it's in Microsoft Purview. It used to be in the 365 Admin Center, and you do need some additional licenses for this, okay? But that there is trust, security, and classification norm. We then move into the Power BI framework, right? Now, I'm keeping mentioning guardrails, right? Think of this a bit as like the guardrails, right? Also, Power BI framework, Microsoft don't refer to this as the framework. I do. I feel like it fits it well. What do I mean by it? Workspaces, apps, app audiences, org apps we have now, right? Individual user accounts, entry ID groups. Also, the process. Who can publish? Where can we publish? Does the BI team and the self-service group of people publish in the same place? Do we separate workspaces by reports and semantic models? Do data flows have their own workspace as well? What about if we have a Fabric capacity? Do we assign the workspaces to that one Fabric capacity? What if different departments have their own capacities from their own budget? There's a lot of things to consider there as well. But just to try and simplify it all, in case we're not aware of these, what's a workspace? Think of a workspace as a container, right? When you open up Power BI Desktop, you click Publish. The first place your semantic model and your report will land in is a workspace. Now, Fabric, a lot has changed, of course, so it could start from a different journey, but pure Power BI, think of it like that, please. Also, I want to call out workspaces. When you're configuring this, thinking how it should all be set up, this is a dev and UAT environment, right? And Microsoft have helped me in promoting this even more because now they've added so much to a workspace. When I speak to internal BI teams that use workspaces to share items with report consumers, I basically go into flows, I add a medallion architecture in there, and I show it to them. I say, is this fit for a CEO of the C-suite? And it's clear as day, no, it's not, right? Which takes us into apps, everyone. Read-only environments. Simple to use. That's where I want my report consumers to go to. And please don't misunderstand me. If it's just you and your and a colleague or a small group of people, cool. Let's use workspaces. But for the business, we want to bring them into the apps where it's user-friendly. All the technical jargon is removed as well. And then afterwards, I guess one common scenario, real big frustration we used to have that used to overcomplicate this framework was previously we started off with one workspace, everyone, right? So we had the finance workspace. Great. One report. But then the execs in finance, well, they wanted their own reports. Then the analysts, then FP&A wanted their own individual reports that the others should not be able to see. So one workspace, one app, because it's a one-to-one relationship, right? We had to then create a finance exec, finance FP&A, finance analysts. What about for the reports that everyone had to access? Just finance workspace. Apps really helped us there, right? Because now think of apps as mini little folders inside an app, right? So before they came out, I was hoping for, I wish we could have multiple apps per workspace. They didn't give us that. We got app audiences and it saved us a lot of effort. Because right now I could have one workspace, one app, and then multiple audiences for the different groups that I said, right? I should also mention org apps, but I haven't used it in production yet. It's still in preview. And for that reason, I'm not going to go more into it. But it is now one workspace, multiple org apps against that workspace. I myself haven't implemented it, like I said, yet. It's still in preview. I'm still trying to see why should I use that over what we're doing now as well. Okay. The other big question, I guess, is how do we split this? Do we split it by department? Do we split it by project? Do we split it by analysis? Do we split it by report? Please stay away from the report. It gets super messy. I don't know why that is even an option sometimes. Department level is fine, right? And that's what most people would recommend. But I just want to call out, sometimes, even though something is best practice, it does not mean it's right. Recently, with 2 separate clients, we went down the path of department or business area, as they called it, and it works great. But for another organization, you might be surprised by this, we used one workspace and we used app audiences to divide it up. Why? Because we understood it's a small team. Also think about dev, UAT, and prod, right? We understood a lot of the business areas, departments, they more or less had to have access to the same reports. It would have been overwhelming to them. They said it would be hard to manage. So again, the point I'm making all is, yes, it might be a very standard approach, best practice, but align this to the organization that you're working in. The other one as well, when you're thinking about how to establish this, is shareable links. I see this so often, and it gets really messy really quickly. And if you use shareable links all, because that is another solution to the problem that I said, we have a finance workspace and we want to share individual reports to this specific group of people. Shareable links, that does the job. That automatically removes the ability to have apps afterwards, right? Management is a big headache if we are sharing with a much larger group of users, okay? But again, keep it as simple as you need. Don't just go down, it has to be by department level. Really think about the architecture that you're working with, the people you're working with, and align it closely to them as well. Okay. The other one, semantic models. So many might think, Laz, why are you talking about semantic models in governance? Isn't this more engineering? Sure, yeah. That said, I'm sure we all agree, a lot of the things I already mentioned, security, access, enabling self-service, Copilot, they all directly are impacted by this here. And it's funny, to this day, all the way back from 2016, starting to help clients, we always go into the semantic model. This is where we spend so much time as well. If we build a semantic model the wrong way, it will propagate everything down, right? Even with Copilot, everyone, I mean, 50% of the job is just doing what we always had to do, right? And that will make everything easier, not just from Copilot, from a self-service perspective, right? Think about it. If we're using a star schema approach, hopefully we are. If we're not using it, we're not aware of it, I can have a whole day session on this. Try look into star schemas. Why do we use facts and dimensions? The benefits. It gives us better simplicity. It's more simple. It makes it more scalable. We can expand these models out a lot easier as well. And they are more performant. They're built more for analytical solutions such as Power BI. And then in there as well, make sure all the elements are human readable, right? If there's any ambiguity, remove it. Any underscores, any primary keys, foreign keys, etc., hide them. We also have something called implicit versus explicit measures. In other words, explicit is when we add an aggregator around it in DAX, right? We want to promote a measure to say this is a sum or a count, etc. If we don't, and it just comes in Power BI with a little sigma symbol, think of it as an implicit measure. We want to push it down on the other side. We want to create display folders. Again, we're talking about going down a journey of governance and enabling end users as well. We have to make it easier for them, right? Okay. And like I said, we'll touch upon this a little bit later on, but the plan, if I had to really summarize this, really try and stick to a star schema. Think about how you can make it more readable to a human, because that will then feed into Copilot afterwards as well. Okay. The next one, everyone, is the data dictionary, right? So we have a semantic model. We now need to define the language, right? The dictionary is where the business decides what does everything mean. What's sales? What's revenue? Is it net? Is it gross? What about subscriptions? What about payment plans? How do we incorporate this in here? How does it work? What's an active customer, right? When do they become active? What are the rules for them to be non-active afterwards? We really need to nail these down. And they can't live in someone's mind. We can't just leave them in a Power BI solution, which is a very common thing as well, right? And here's the thing. I would highly recommend you start doing this process as early as possible. So what we do, when we go in and we start gathering requirements, a big chunk of that is to nail these down. And I know it might be difficult going through workshops. It might feel awkward sometimes slowing people down and say, what does sales mean? What does revenue mean? But I promise you, if you're in a large workshop with people, it's even better sometimes, you will find there will be a debate amongst them because someone would have thought it includes this, it doesn't include this. The other thing, if we don't know our own definitions, Copilot won't know them. And when I mentioned of that scenario previously, it was exactly that, where we rolled out way too quickly. We could not nail down our own definitions, right? If you want Copilot enablement the way you envision it, we need to nail it down. The other thing as well, everyone, is ownership. Someone needs to own this, right? If someone doesn't own this, it will quickly die out. Start simple, right? When I mean simple, don't think about Microsoft Purview, unified catalog, etc. Just start somewhere, right? Make it accessible to the initial end users who will be accessing the solutions as well. And promise you, the group of people, the business you're working with afterwards, they will thank you for this. Okay? So that's the data dictionary, everyone. The other thing I'd highly, highly recommend for that governance foundation is version control and lifecycle management. So from a version control perspective, some common scenarios we still find. Someone needs to make a change to a solution in the Power BI service. They go to the Power BI service. They download the latest version in production, but we don't even know what production is sometimes, right? They make changes, they republish it. Someone else has a local version, they republish it, and then you can see the mess. This is a real governance issue, right? We cannot have this, especially if we're using Power BI to make some of the core decisions in the organization. So at least let's be able to have a single place where we can all locate what the latest version is, and also a nice and easy way to roll back to the previous version. I mean, I would prefer a little bit more. I would like to know what changes were made, when they were made, by who they were made, down to the item level, right? But here's the point. How do we implement this? Well, there's many ways, but let's stick to SharePoint and let's stick to Git and Azure DevOps, right? A recent scenario, not too long ago, spoke to a BI team, an internal data team, and they were pushed down the path of Azure DevOps. And they weren't aware of branching policies, what branches are. They couldn't use Azure Data Studio, right? They didn't understand a lot of the key concepts needed from an Azure DevOps Git process perspective. It made everything super difficult. It caused more damage than good. So again, I'm going back to that previous point that I made. Of course, it's more of the enterprise grade source control application of features, but is it right for your organization? So if it's not, start with SharePoint, everyone, at minimum, right? Have some form of version control in place so you can revert back to what you previously had as well. And the same, everyone, goes from a deployment perspective, right? Dev, UAT, prod workspaces. And again, you don't have to overcomplicate it, right? The common question I get, because we go down the self-service path or we try to promote self-service, is, well, what do we do from the self-service? Are we going to create Dev, UAT, and prod if we have separate workspaces for, let's say, the super users or the champions internally? No, right? We shouldn't. In many cases, we might. In one instance, we just had we had a test prod, not a dev environment, but for the core enterprise team, take advantage of items like deployment pipelines. If you don't have a license for it, because I think, you do need PPU at minimum for it, or fabric capacity, it's about the process all, right? You want items to land somewhere so you can test and view them before you push anything into production. That process there needs to exist, right? So again, just be aware of the licensing, everyone, for both the Git integration with workspaces and for deployment pipelines. You won't get that with your standard pro licenses, right? Traditionally, we maintained it manually before deployment pipelines as well. You can do that as well, right? The Power BI Center of Excellence. So, what is the Power BI Center of Excellence, everyone? It's a group of people that come together to promote the adoption of Power BI, right? To enable and empower end users. That's what I would say is the core responsibility of this group as well. But at the same time, as we are doing that part of the PBI COE, we should also put the guardrails, the governance in place, right? Now, I have run quite a few of these over the years, helped start them up. I was attending them on a bi-weekly, on a monthly basis, setting the agenda, trying to get some excitement and buzz going as well. The way they usually start is by a group of people from engineering, data, IT, the BI team, and that's fine, right? Totally with that. Let's just get the wheels rolling, start anywhere, I like to say, because the benefits are huge if we get this right. But then it has to be BI-led, but it has to be business-focused. Eventually, it will just become a place where IT people come and moan about what the end users are doing otherwise, right? It cannot be that, right? Or it'll be a place we come and talk about the latest updates or something like that. It happens all the time. What we should have a plan in place to extend this to members from the business. And the way that could look, everyone, think about your Power BI champions, super users, right? You might be thinking, well, this is going to get really big. It could get big, but if it gets really big and there's the drive and the ambition for people to join, that's a really good problem to have, right? And that's more for, I'll say, much larger organizations. But when that did happen, there are different structures and formats of Power BI Center of Excellences that we could establish, right? Like satellite groups, etc. But again, we'll really try and move past it, set an agenda right from the beginning for this. Also, there needs to be an owner. We all know how we are, right? If we set something up, it's not part of our natural job responsibility. There needs to be an owner to promote everyone. Hey, why have you not attended? Here's the agenda. Everyone goes there and knows what to expect as well. Okay? But again, the fundamental point here is they're listening. What's going on in the business? What's working? What's not working? One item in the agenda that we had is to review the logs, right? Are people accessing? If not, why? Another item on the agenda we had in another place was about the internal portal. We created a portal where people can go and be part of the Power BI community to drive it, to create some buzz in the organization, right? And we was listening what's happening there and we'll incorporate back in. So these are sort of things we need to have on that agenda. Okay. So here we are, everyone. There are so many things we can talk about, but from my personal experience, I highlighted 7 things there to embed or have or consider early on to form that enterprise BI foundation. So like I said before, everyone, we set that foundation now. We have a better place we can move forward to, and now it's time to start building on top. Now, as I mentioned earlier on, this is where many organizations go wrong. I'm sure many have a different opinion here as well, but I am absolutely for moving into some form of self-service. And listen, I totally get it. Your organization, your industry, compliance, level of risk, all these things have to be considered. But like I said, self-service is not one thing. It doesn't have to be access to the entire organization. It doesn't have to be access to multiple departments. It might be one department. If we don't want one department, let's find a few individuals within that department, maybe even less. Okay. One thing I've done previously, for example, to try and work our way into it and see the benefits, because there was also appetite from the business to get into some self-service, was we used something called personalized visuals. Not very common in Power BI, fell through the cracks, but I love that feature. What is it? We basically have a single visual on a canvas, right? And then we enable something called personalized visuals. And then using something like Tabular Editor, we create something called perspectives, and we limit the different, if you're from analysis services, you'll know that as well, but we limit the measures, the tables, the columns that they could see, right? So we're not giving them so much self-service where they open up a blank Power BI desktop, they click on semantic models, and then they have free range to drag and drop everything. We've limited that down even more, right? I always like to say, let's trial it. We should, right? push it out to the organization. Let's see what we get. What are the benefits? Has it worked? Were there any major risks? And then we'll learn, and then we'll push it out to another group afterwards, right? In a controlled, incremental way. Okay? So what are now the things, what things should we be considering now as we move into managed self-service BI, right? Or if we are in managed self-service BI. First things first, the report of the champions. Naturally, we're moving into a space where we want people to start creating their own reports, right? Even using Copilot. Think how this role might be changing, by the way, right? So who are the champions? They are individuals in the organization that will promote the usage of Power BI, and in plain terms, they will be able to access Power BI, create reports for their part of the business, right? A common question as well, who should we be choosing for this? When I walk into an organization, I always have my eye out for data enthusiasts, people that ask a lot of questions, people who ask, can we have the latest version of Power BI desktop? People who have a good relationship with the core BI or data team because they have a natural interest in data. Those people, they are great candidates to pick up this role. But it's very easy also for me to say this or for this to be read somewhere. The reality is you can't just go to this group of people and say, you're a report of the champions, start creating reports. That won't work, right? If you just make it feel like, oh, there's a new responsibility on top of everything else I have to do, it won't go far. They'll drop the title, they'll drop the role. So we need to try and put these people more on the pedestal, right? We need to let the line managers know that, hey, they are adopting a status of Power BI champions as well. We need to give them more support than what we give other people at the beginning, because they will ease the pressure off us as the core reporting team also, right? And it has to be a continuous level of guidance. We need to let them know what's the frameworks that they can operate in, what are the benefits that they have compared to other people, right? These are the sort of things we need to be thinking about because we are going to be giving them more elevated access to other things as well. But again, super users, report with the champions, different organizations that I work with, we usually call them different things. Okay? The internal portal. Okay. Not sure if anyone has one already in the organization, but we spent some time on this, right? So what does it mean? Think of it as the heart of the Power BI community. It's your collaboration tool, communication tool in the organization. What do we do here? We build a community within there. So think things like FAQs, think things like starter templates, go live checklists, right? Have a place where end users can ask questions. When end users come to us afterwards and they ask us questions like, hey, how do we do this? Or, hey, how do I get a license? Even if we know the answer, fine, give it to them, but say, hey, can you do us a favor? Can you please direct it to the portal? And we'll answer you there. We're not going to ignore it. And that's another important thing. In the past, worked with a really large insurer. We went down this path, and some of the key challenges we had was the BI team at the beginning was not maintaining it, right? Now, that caused a lot of end users to not go back to it. That's one way to kill a collaboration platform completely or a community. If someone goes there and they see, oh, this is stale, it's not being maintained, it's not active, they're not going to go there anymore. And first impressions really count when we configure this, right? So again, think of, is it Viva Engage? Is it Teams? Is it SharePoint? Do not bring a new collaboration tool just for this purpose. I mean, we're already trying to make people change, follow new governance processes around Power BI, the way they were previously working. We don't want to introduce a other tool just so they can learn something else. Okay? Empowering, not lockdown. So, apologies if this feels like a repeat, but it deserves its own slide, right? And here's the thing I want you all to think about. Many times, I guess, as a data team, the BI team, I used to think like this as well. We almost feel like the end users are trying to cause chaos, but they're not. They're trying to do their jobs, right? And I think the quicker we get into that mentality, the better it becomes. They're not trying to cause chaos. They're just trying to get on with their job. They're trying to find data to answer a business question or get back to their line managers, whatever it is, right? We need to set up these guardrails for them to succeed. If they succeed, we succeed with governance. If governance is pure lockdown restriction, you're not going to get very far. End users will find a way around things. They always do, right? For example, if you lock down self-service, no access, you have to raise a ticket, they're going to find a way to export data out, maintain it in Excel, and that becomes like a mini data silo culture, right? So we need to enable them. We need to give them the environment to operate in. We're not going to go in the tenant settings and remove everything for them, right? We're not going to just disable Power BI desktop for everyone in the organization. Sure, in some areas, yes, but in many cases, why not give some level of control to them, but not allow them to publish anywhere? So there's different levels, right? The other big one is training all, right? We need to help end users come on this journey with us. Now, I'm not going to tell you the obvious stuff, right? First thing, persona types. I always used to categorize what are the different persona types we need in Power BI to be successful. Your report consumers, your report authors, your semantic model designers now, and your Fabric admins. Feel free to add more if anyone thinks something different, but these are your 4 persona types you need to succeed in Power BI. I'm not talking about the other workflows in Fabric, right? There's a whole load of other personas now. So when you are thinking about training, upskilling people, split them out. Some people might fall into 2 buckets or 2 categories, usually the report authors and model designers. That's fine. But the worst thing is to try and bring people on a journey of change, and then you're also trying to show someone who's a pure report author how to optimize DAX, or the difference between a star schema and a snowflake schema, or normalization. They should not know these things. And it's not that they're just going to be bored for 2-3 hours in the workshop. They're going to walk away, seeing this happen, and they now think, to use Power BI, I must be an expert in data modeling. Not the case. We want to prevent that from happening because in the organization, word spreads quickly, especially if you're transitioning away from an old tool or trying to implement something new that already has resistance against it. So split by consumer, or persona, sorry, I should say. The other thing, the champions, give them more tailored training. Also, why not training governance? It's a fair question, right? If we're trying to promote governance, everyone, why not have some time? Nothing long and boring, because you have to make this right for the business users as well. Something to show them what we are doing with governance and how they could promote governance in their own job roles as well, right? Because the problem with training I don't like is we're too focused on tools and features and capabilities. And it's great up to a certain point. But then afterwards, if we're trying to bring people on this governance journey with us, let's show them what are some things they could be doing. And this could be a really short session, everyone. But if they have it in the back of their minds as well, it will just help it go out to the wider organization. The other things around training also, I guess one thing that we do a lot of training on is not just Power BI, right? It's, okay, you're using Power BI, but how do you build real ROI solutions, right? Find data visualization, find features and capabilities. But before we get to any of that, how do you ask the real hard-hitting questions, right? How do you avoid feeling awkward in workshops, right? How do you bring an audience to life and really say, guys, listen, some responsibilities on your end here as well, right? So upskill your report authors in those areas, and also Copilot, right? Again, we're talking about enabling Copilot, right? We're talking about the governance around it. We're talking how we set the foundation to succeed. We should help the end users understand how do they read the results from Copilot? How do they ask things as well? Or just some more awareness that, hey, Copilot might give you an answer. It might sound great, but have you considered this, right? So these are the additional things beyond what you'll probably hear on standard slides around training as well. And the other one I really dislike, learn online. That one kills me, right? When we tell people, oh, there's so much training and free content out there, not good enough, right? Why? Because they have their jobs and their lives as well. If you want them to learn something, carve out some time for them, right? Apart from that, it's overwhelming, right? Especially with Fabric in the mix now. If you tell a business user who has no background in data analytics, BI, etc., go learn Power BI, they're not going to learn it. You need to give them structure. And that's why I say maybe split it by persona, make it even more focused on their jobs and their responsibilities. That's how we will succeed. And with all the other things I mentioned around the internal portal for the continuous guidance, around super users or champions, all this is a big circle and it comes together, right? The other thing, I have briefly touched upon this as well, everyone, controlled rollout. Now, what do I mean by that? Again, there is no one size fit all. Don't give everyone in the organization access immediately, do on an incremental basis, identify the department that might benefit the most earlier on. That's one way. Or maybe think what department requires self-service the most. Bring them on board. Don't want to repeat a lot of the other things I said earlier, but again, it doesn't have to be a big bang approach. It can be in different ways that you roll out self-service. It's not dead by any means. And think about it. If it's purely the Power BI team, I'm sure you can all sit here and imagine, if only the Power BI team, the BI team or the core reporting team are managing all these requests, you're going to have a big backlog, no time for innovation, and various other common challenges I'm sure we can all envision. So we need to find a way to enable the business. Auditing and monitoring, everyone. So if we're going on governance journey, we need to understand what's going on, right? This has become a bit better, right? So just to offer some more practical things, where can you start with this, everyone? The admin monitoring workspace. If you haven't used this, I highly recommend you look into it. It's a set of pre-built reports. They're quite good, I think, right? There's one limitation I'm not happy with, but the admin monitoring workspace, your Fabric admin needs to install this, and then your admin can then give the right people access. I think it's only through shareable links, funny enough, that they can give access to this, right? But anyway, parts of this is it only contains 30 days historical data, and the other ones contain 60 days historical data, I think, as well. So that's the limitation that I'm not happy with. When we work with organizations as well, I guess that's one thing they push back on naturally, right? But a good starting point. You also have the more basic stuff, like the usage metrics at the report level as well. The other thing I want you to consider all is what data should we be tracking here, depending on your organization. I mean, there are a lot of activities, but get the activity log, activity events API. That's the activities of the end users, what they're doing, etc. Right? And by the way, this is what I do. When I walk into an organization sometimes, even if we don't have the capacity, the resource, or the budget to build something bespoke, that's fine. I just take the data as it comes, JSON, put a timestamp against it, just store it somewhere. At least you're not losing historical data. Because I think that one is 90 days, and then you lose anything previously. So just take a snapshot of it, store it, and then afterwards in the future, when you want to build something, when you have the time to build something, you can, right? The other one is the metadata scanner, I think it is. It's an API again, but it's more from an inventory perspective. And this essentially gives you the number of artifacts that you have across your tenancy. And it gives you a snapshot at the point of when it's run. There are some limitations with the API that I can't remember, but another thing you should be considering as well, if you're using Fabric capacity, right, you need to look after your CUs, right? Memory is less of a concern now, but point is resources, right? Spend a lot of time on this here as well. The capacity metrics app, we have a newer version. It is better. I do prefer it. You do need to install it again, everyone. That's more for a Fabric capacity. And the other thing I want to call out for the COE, right? Make it part of the agenda. I think I said this earlier, right? Maybe the center of excellence. Monitor what's going on. We're talking about change. We need to monitor it. Is it going well? Is it going bad? Are people using it? How are they using it? Are people sharing stuff where they shouldn't? Are they accessing things we weren't aware that they had access to, right? And by the way, I don't think I added it, but there's another community tool that's been built, I think, from Microsoft employees called FWAM. Do you know it? No? I forgot the name. Right? I think it's FU, right? What's the name? FWAM or something, right? Again, that's not Microsoft built, but I was playing around with it. It's quite impressive, I have to be honest, right? And what they do is, from my understanding, don't quote me on this, they take a lot of these APIs from here and they it just simplifies it, right? So have a look into that as well. All again, just tread carefully because I don't know if they're updating it or if it's aligned to any changes that Microsoft make, etc. But it does make life easier. Again, the admin monitoring workspace, though, is a really good starting point. Okay, coming to the end of the session now. Copilot readiness, right? If we're going on this journey, or the semantic model part that I mentioned earlier, honestly, stick to the fundamentals there. It really helps. But some things I want to call out from here as well. We have prep data for AI. It's the feature in Power BI desktop, and there we can enable what Copilot will be accessing in the model, right? What measures, columns. I don't know if it's at the table level, but measures and columns. We can remove all the foreign keys, the primary keys, etc. Synonyms, again, teach Copilot business language as you would expect. Take advantage of synonyms all. By the way, if you use traditional Q&A, the Q&A visual and synonyms in there, I think those are going to get decommissioned sometime this year as well. Just bear that in mind. The other thing is AI instructions, and I really like this, right? Just an idea. Maybe you could use another AI to basically create these instructions for this one based on your feedback, right? And I like that it's just a text interface. And I can say, if someone says verse target, they most likely mean verse budget, right? Or you could even add your synonyms in there, right? I've been playing around with it. It's quite good. Verified answers. If you have a visual and you think, yep, this is the exact, the precise visual result we want if someone asks this question, you could also configure it there. And then the other one is we can approve the feature name. I think it's approved for Copilot, right? I don't know how to feel about that. So what is it all? When Copilot gives you an answer, I think there's like a bit of a warning underneath to say, hey, this is AI. Make sure you check what it's saying, or a bit of a warning. You can actually go in and say, I approve this for Copilot. And I think it just removes that warning maybe, right? So pros and cons here. Maybe you want to keep it on, but if you've built everything really good, you can go ahead and mark it for approval also, right? So those are some of the things we could be doing from a Copilot perspective to make sure the foundations are better. But again, everyone, please think back to traditional data modeling. That's what we want to do, okay? Okay, so coming up to the hour now to finalize. Enterprise BI, we saw 7 core things we should be doing to build that foundation. Discipline at the core. That's the core there, everyone. I promise, if you spend some time here, if you're in a chaotic environment and you pull stuff back in, you build it correctly, then you move into managed-led, you give more access to the business, more flexibility to them, start building on top of it as well. Do not think business-led is a target. You need to have a really good use case to go there. Right, it can get really messy very quickly if you start enabling people to start building their own semantic models. There's another set of considerations that I haven't gone through today that you really need to think about when you move there as well. So that's the session for today. Why does governance matter more than ever? We mentioned the 3 reasons: AI, people want to be more data-driven, and also Microsoft Fabric. And we went through a set of factors that you need to set to try and build that foundation out. So thank you. Are there any questions? They've improved, I think, from the previous versions. We have a bit of a newer interface. What's the challenge? Is it Sure, and you're not the first person to tell me that, but when I sort of dug into it, it's more on the user interface and it feels more clunky, they said, compared to what they would usually have more from a outside Power BI perspective. If you are working with many workspaces and you have Dev UAT and Prod for all of them, it would also be very difficult to manage it manually as well. I personally haven't come across any sort of issues where we deployed from Dev UAT to Prod and there were just continuous challenges and it was on Power BI's fault, right? I haven't come across that because I use them fairly frequently. So I can't really give a better answer on that. But again, like I said earlier, if it's a very small number of workspaces, if it's a smaller framework environment that you're working in, then sure, do it manually. But I think you'll naturally be pushed on the other side. And I think there's now some APIs across deployment pipelines. So that level of automation can really help. Right? Is there anything specific that was failing or not aware of it? Gotcha. Try them again. Right now you're doing it manually, right? Try it out again because if it was a while back, you have a sort of newer interface as well and see what it does now. Yeah. And if you have any challenges, drop me a message. I'd be interested to know what they are. Yeah. Yep. Interesting. Yeah. Fine. Okay. Fine. But the other thing to bear in mind on deployment pipelines, or if we in case this is one of the issues, because this was an early issue when before we had auto binding in data in deployment pipelines, right? So if I had a shared semantic model or some sort of artifact and I'm deploying from a different environment, from test to UAT and prod, and then we have databases, dev instance, UAT, prod instance, etc., then that was a bit of a nightmare. But right now it auto binds as well. So, right? Yeah. Maybe it's changed.
Question about when you hand the data model over to people to give them access to the model, how do you sort of screen people before you access
Sure. Yeah. Sure, to the actual semantic model. So just to make sure I understood the question, before we give access to the semantic model, in other words, for people to create their own reports, right? Absolutely. I mean, it goes back to what we said. Can we find a group of super users or champions, right? And I guess when we have those super users or champions, that's what I meant by give them more dedicated support. Don't just enable access to them and let them get on with it by themselves, right? Find a small group of people. I totally appreciate why you're thinking I wouldn't give access to them. Have a few dedicated sessions with them. Set them up a few maybe in-house lunch and learns, etc., just with those individuals. Train them, show them how to use it, let them get on with it. They're doing it within your guardrails after all, so the risk is mitigated completely. And then re-invite them back in and see how they're getting on. That's how we do it, right? But again, it's through that super users or champion status. Yep. Okay.
Are there any third-party tools available for the governance or Wireframe?
How do we, what were the governance, sorry?
Any third-party tools available?
Third-party tools. Third-party tools for governance. You have Microsoft Purview, I guess, as well, and that's a whole different world.
Purview is more in semantic, right? But often possibly.
It's more than semantic, you said?
Yeah.
Well, sorry, what do you mean?
Synapse.
It's on Synapse. No, I guess we can scan Power BI as well from Microsoft Purview. I mean, I've done it, it's been quite a while now, and extracted all different items from there, right? Yeah. Sorry? In here, sorry? Yeah. Anyone using Purview in here? There we go.
Successful? It's a big question and answer.
Yeah.
So it depends what you want to use it for. But we use it a lot for SharePoint, emails, Word, everything goes through it essentially. And if it's like, it's a massive beast.
Yeah.
So you really need to again have people at the top buying and pushing that and being a champion for like 50% stuff.
Yeah.
It's huge.
So that's for your use of AI and stuff. So.
No. That AI again is a secondary thing, but that's a new one. It was all about governance layer, part of the business. So I work for a consultancy, and that was a key thing for them getting some sort of control on their data, because they have certain restrictions on how long they keep things for. So they had to go with it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Just a question on the capacity metrics report. We've got an issue where we've got one or two reports that are utilizing way more capacity than they ought to. And I haven't yet managed to figure out a way to drill down into the individuals who are making use of a lot of that capacity.
Sure.
Other than just seeing those 30-second segments where you can drill down into the detail.
Yeah.
If I wanted to see, for example, an entire day who used what capacity on an individual basis, that's been something I've struggled with.
No, I spent so much of my life in these capacity metrics and I still can't remember. Are you saying that we can't go down to the user level in the capacity metrics app?
So all I've seen is on the capacity, the compute usage page, the second page.
Yeah.
Well, on the top right hand side, you've got the one with the foreground and background usage with all the red lines.
Sure.
And it's
Yeah.
broken up into 30-second segments. You can actually click on any one of those, drill down into the usage detail.
Yeah.
And that'll break it down, but as I said, it gives you 30 seconds.
Correct. If
Which-
it works in 30-second
Yeah.
cycles,
And
that's
I want to know
fine.
what's happened for the day. Like, you know, because obviously you might use a lot of capacity at 9 a.m. and I might use a lot of capacity at 2 p.m. So if I drill down at the 9 a.m., I'm going to flag you and not me. I want to see, okay, what's the day? Who are the people that used a lot? To say, hey, what are you doing? Why are you using so much capacity?
Sure.
I need to see the whole day.
I don't know if we can have that particular view, in all honesty. I mean, I'm happy, whereas I only used the previous capacity metrics app compared to the new version. I am very pleased. I'll be honest with you, it is still challenging sometimes, me as well, when I dive into it, right?
Yeah.
You need to know a lot of the key items on how the underlying fabric engine works as well, right? The throttling, the bursting, etc. You need to know how all these things work. You need to understand that the cycles and what can go on each cycles in the CUs and whether any CUs need to be taken from future cycles and then what happens when you pay them back. But I can't answer your question, I'm not aware. Yeah.
Yeah, capacity metrics actually. So you said it's got a 30, 60 minute data sort of rolling view. So I did pull that data into Power BI, create my own report. Right? You know, you can do that. Don't know if you,
Through the API.
there's a data set somewhere available through capacity metrics where you can sort of mimic the visuals that it creates for you.
Yeah.
Mimic those yourself.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, yeah.
And try and sort of get
Yeah.
to that.
I have considered that would probably give us exactly what we need. It's frustrating to jump all these.
Yeah, there is an option. I can't remember where it is exactly, but I remember recreating the exact visuals on there and then adding some extras because I knew it needed a little bit more than what was there. Just needed to understand why was it throttling on that line at that point and at that point.
Sure thing.
And yeah, so I sort of made some amends to that. So I think there is a way to do it. It's just a case of this allowing to
Yeah.
I don't know if that might have changed as well because that was probably over a year ago. So
No, fair, because you can do that, of course, with, for example, the usage metrics, right, in there, but the capacity metrics, that's in the direct query, if I remember. Isn't it?
Yeah.
The direct query, but yeah, that is an option. You can get in there, drag and drop yourself, and create a particular view, like Shell said. Maybe that's an option.
Yeah, I think you've got to do a copy of the report and then somehow get access to the underlying.
yeah,
I mean, there's some weird.
I think with the pre-built reports for usage, monitoring, etc., I personally feel like we've always been let down a little bit, right? With a newer monitoring workspace, I think if you haven't accessed them already, I think they are really good compared to what we used to have. But yeah, there is still some way to go. And try out what Fwan, have a look at, right? There is a big element of capacity metrics in there as well, actually, in different views. So try it out.
Is that a tool, a painful tool?
I think it's free. No, I think it's free. It was built from, I think, 2 current Microsoft employees, but so it's not Microsoft approved yet, right? Because they can't give you a guarantee on how often they update it, etc. But have a look at it. It might even give you some good ideas on what you're looking for and how maybe you can build it yourself.
And interesting, just to back on what you've just been saying, all my problems are because a couple of pairs and anti models that are calculated tables built on top of calculated tables.
Yep. And as soon as you remove those from the equation, it helps out a lot. Yeah. Cool. Perfect. Thank you, everyone. Feel free to connect on LinkedIn as well. And if you have any questions afterwards, feel free to reach out.